There's not really. A lot of alternate versions didn't make the final cut. I think we've mentioned on a previous interview that the rationale for these reissues is to have all the tracks that Chris and I worked on or wrote around the same time as a main album that we think are worth releasing, or as it says, of master quality, which means that it's actually sort of like some kind of finished record. I mean, the problem about nowadays is that on YouTube there are tapes of demos that have been stolen and then put on YouTube, so people have heard songs. If they're not on the record, we haven't sort of forgotten to put them on. They're just not really what we would regard as good enough. Well, we have a vast number of unfinished songs, actually going back to 1982. People might know the names of them because in our magazine, which is called Literally, now comes out once a year, it's called Annually, we tend to mention all the song titles that we've worked on. But that doesn't mean that they're brilliant, finished, glistening recordings of these songs. It means they're sort of often just half-baked demos with an idea of the chorus or maybe not finished. Sometimes we might use an old demo as the basis of a new song. For instance, we had a demo we were going to put on one of these reissues. Chris didn't like the fact he had a vocal on it and he didn't like it, but he liked the chorus idea. And that chorus idea turned into Burn on our last album, Super. So that was based on a demo which was at least 20 years old. And that occasionally can happen.
My favourite remix that we've done was for a group called Atomizer, and it was called Hooked on Radiation. And that was sort of the height of the electro clash scene, and it sounds quite authentic. It's got lots of energy to it. That's mine. And then the favourite remix we've had done would definitely be So Hard by David Morales. My favourite mix by other people is still Young Offender by Jam and Spoon. It takes the song, keeps the integrity of the song, but it just sort of improves it in every possible way. And my favourite mix, actually I like Hooked on Radiation a lot. It's a really good song. It was never a hit or anything, but it's a fantastic song. Maybe Walking on Thin Ice for Yoko Ono. Oh, actually, no, it's not. It's Human by The Killers. Sometimes when we haven't done a remix for ages actually, but we used to put new vocals on it. And I kind of wanted to make it duet with me and Brandon singing. We came up with some new bits. It works as a pop record and a rock record and also as a dance record. You can see with these reissues that in the ones from the 80s only have one bonus CD, and that's because in those days the technology of writing was more complicated. We didn't have our own studio in the 80s, so we used to go somewhere to write, and the equipment was more complicated to work and much slower. And then in the early 90s Chris had a house in the countryside and we had a studio for the first time. And also Pete Gledel, our programmer, would work with us, and so we got more prolific. And as time went on, we would spend more time in our own studios. And now we have one in London and one in Berlin. And I say studios, they're just little rooms. I don't know statistically what the answer to that question is, but I know when you look at the album Release, you can see what a lot of different styles we wrote in. And none of these reissues actually touch on the projects we've done outside our albums, i.e. Partnership Potemkin or Close to Heaven. Actually, there's a couple of demos on one of them. If you look at Elysium, it's only got one bonus disc, and that's because what would have been the further listening for Elysium is the album Electric. We made a whole album out of other songs we'd written at the same time as Elysium. And at the same time, we were probably writing the Alan Turing piece, you know, or The Most Incredible Thing, I can't remember the dates now. So it's a difficult question to answer because I don't know statistically the answer, but maybe, I don't know, maybe Release. I know this has probably been asked because people often think we put some of our best songs on the B-side. What we tend to do with B-sides is maybe put on the most recent song we've written. Like, for instance, a B-side I've always liked by us is a song called Always, which is the B-side of of Home and Dry, and people have occasionally said, why wasn't that on the relevant album release? Well, actually it wasn't made then. We did it right at the end, and we'd sort of pretty much finished the album. And that's why when you do a B-side, you want it to be sort of fresh. So really the main criterion is the most recent thing we've done. So you know, when you release singles, there's something about it. The process isn't like it used to be, but you wanted to kind of freshen it up. You know, if you're putting out a single that's already been on the album, we've always felt that the single should come with other tracks, maybe new tracks, so it's something kind of fresh for the audience to hear. The point of a single nowadays is to bring out a song that you hope radio will play. I mean, that's what a single is. If a single is not played on the radio, it may as well not exist, really. In fact, it doesn't exist if it's not played on the radio. That would be the main criterion. And of course, what you think is going to be played on the radio is probably the song that people think is really catchy or something, whatever the word would be nowadays. There's another thing there that you want to, the first single of an album, you want to sort of say, this is the direction they've gone in on this record. So it gives some maybe some hint of, not necessarily, but maybe some hint of the album. So like when Yes came out, Love Etc. was the first single. You know, we wanted to put out a collaboration with Xenomania, and also it was an obviously catchy song, and also it sounded a bit different. So actually, to come back to this question, on that album, we always thought the song All Over the World should have been the second single. The record company and our radio people thought it should be Did You See Me Coming? And they made that decision after late, really. And actually, I still think we were right. But that's the only time I can ever really recall being even remotely bothered about it. And nowadays, it's more casual. Like, for instance, when we brought out Electric, we had a track sort of was out there. On the last album, Super Inner Sanctum, was that a single? Was it just sort of out there? It was a video to give an idea of what the album's going to be, to excite people. It's not that you're expecting Radio 2 to play it 25 times a week.
Oh, well, I don't revisit it, generally. I've not even listened to the reissues. I have to.
Yes, you have. When? When we did the interview with Chris Heath for the booklet. We listened.
We sat down and listened to it all?
We sat down over a 2-day period, listened to them and then talked about them.
No memory of that. I probably think...
It's quite a long time ago.
I'm a very binary person. It's either I like it or I don't like it.
But we don't sit down and analyse how we could have done something better. The one I can remember we changed was Release, which was originally called Home. We mentioned it to a friend of ours, Wolfgang Tillmans, and he said, why are you calling it Home? He says, you should just call it something like, I don't know, Release. And we immediately liked that title. And that was, I think, the only time we've ever changed. My recollection of actually is that, it could be wrong, is that we had the title actually while we were making the album, like we did with Very as well. Both of those albums, my recollection, rightly or wrongly, is that we had the title for most of the album making process. Introspective, I remember we spent forever trying to come up with, we couldn't think of a title for it. And the reason we chose Introspective is because actually, not that the album is introspective, we thought it sounded kind of ravey, and that was when the rave scene was just starting in 1988. I'm not unhappy with any of our album titles though. Well, we had a moment in the 90s where Bilingual was going to be called Pet Shop Boys. That's the Way Life Is, from the lyric from C'est Vie de Ray. I think we might even have done some sample artwork for it. And then we thought, no, the one-word thing is quite a strong idea. And on pop art, we cheated by did we hyphenate or pushed it together? So it was like it's really 2 words, pop art, but we present it as 1 word.